by the black person, you get your feelings hurt. So we're going to be talking about, does white fragility exist? Is it just another manifestation of racism? What can we do about it? How can we avoid it? And that's going to be really essential in moving forward, I think, into opening ourselves and our church up to not only people of color, but everyone. So today, identity. How would you identify yourself? Like, I would look at myself and I would say, I'm female, right? I'm way overeducated, right? I would definitely put that in there. But how invested am I in my identity?
What in the world is overeducated?
I have way too many degrees.
Okay.
I just started and I just never stopped.
Okay.
And in fact, I started school again yesterday. So
there's no such
What do you
thing
do for
as
fun?
overeducated.
I think she goes to school.
Evidently, I go to school. Yeah.
She's addicted to school.
That's just following your dream, Julie. Don't ever feel like you're overeducated.
Yeah,
You're a smart girl.
You know, I did the whole science thing, and now I'm doing criminal justice, which is.
But you're tuned in.
Really.
Much more than me.
Which is,
I don't know what white fragility is. Fragility.
That's fine. That's fine.
I really don't.
That's what she's here for. She's going to teach us.
I know she's going to teach us.
Yeah, that's fine. But just be thinking about,
Okay.
Am I fragile because I'm one? What is this nonsense about here? But we'll get to it. Don't worry.
Okay.
But today I want to talk about how we identify ourselves, what things we identify ourselves with, and how much we invest in that. How many of us would consider ourselves to be social justice warriors here?
I have
Social
been.
justice, what?
Warriors.
Social justice.
That's already carried a negative connotation.
Let's just,
I'd like to think maybe I'm not a warrior,
Warrior.
but I'm staying tuned in.
right. And oppression, when you see oppression, it affects you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you identify as a person with empathy for that, right?
That's amazing growing up the way I did, though. That is a big step for me.
I agree.
That's why education's important.
You know, you're from Memphis.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I look around just in my life and I see people who have had decades of opportunities to get where you are, and they have missed every single one of them.
There's a lot of them still around.
Yeah. So, but let's look at those people as well. Why would they hold on to that identity with such fervor?
Because it benefits them. That's why people vote the way they vote. It either is in order to help them or in order to, change the system as a whole. You're wanting to keep the status quo or change it.
Right.
Usually for your own benefit.
It's hard if you're racist to be in the midst of people who are in a racist community and step out and take the black person's side of things.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I ran a newspaper in a largely black county. And it was tough, because I said the right things.
Right, because the people around you were so invested in that identity as a racist.
Not everybody, but.
Right, right.
You know, this day and time, in that situation, one of the reasons people might hesitate to step out and defend when they know they're surrounded in a racist community and in a community that allows people to carry guns, where you have a business in town and you see the parking lot almost overflowing, and it's not people going to Value Print and the florist and the beauty parlor. They're going to the big guns. And I was in the Waffle House a couple of weeks ago, and there were two men who were quite old, probably my age, and they couldn't walk very well, you know, and were carrying guns on their hip. And I thought, what would they do? What would they, well, they're liable to shoot their foot, but they also would, you know, I don't understand this gun culture. I don't understand it. And it affects what we're talking about. It affects how people are willing or unwilling to stand out and speak up, because you think, well, I don't want to get killed. And these people are going around, they don't have to have a permit now. They don't have to go through training. And they're at the Waffle House and they're carrying a gun, you know, and I just think, no, I don't have a gun. I will never have a gun. And I've had people say, but how would you defend yourself? I said, well, I'm not going to kill somebody. If it's my time and somebody kills me, then it's my time. But I am not going to carry a gun. I'm not going to own a gun. And even y'all might think that's stupid. I am not.
Emily, tell us about your experience with carrying a gun.
Well, I believe the newspaper at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I had this big stack of pages, and I would put my gun in its holster. I mean, it was
Where were you then?
Edgefield, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
On top of these flats of newspapers. Well, I couldn't have grabbed the gun and done anything, but that's how I left the newspaper at 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. It was my background. My grandmother had guns. I don't know how I got into that, but anyway, I was a woman who was married, but I was alone when I left the newspaper at night. I just did it. I figured, scare me. It was a great big German Luger.
Could you shoot it?
Yeah,
Had you ever
shoot
shot?
it.
Oh.
Yeah. I had never shot anybody.
No.
Yeah.
Tell them what you did with the guns.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I took it up to the mountain house and busted them all up.
Oh.
Oh.
If you were back in Edgefield doing that same job, would you have kept it?
Would I have kept it?
Yeah.
Not now, not knowing, not the person I am now.
What would it have been an alternative? Maybe to get a German Shepherd dog?
A baseball bat works.
It's heavy to carry.
Yeah,
But
put
you
a
can kill
sock
somebody
on it,
too.
Do what?
if you're going to carry a baseball bat, put a sock on it, because if they grab it, they'll have it at the beginning, but if they get a hold of that sock will slide off, and then you have your initial protection.
This y'all spread everything.
A golf club might work.
Pepper spray.
Wasp spray is fabulous.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to go to the hospital to get it removed.
Well, you put their eyes, if somebody came in, I keep wasp spray near the back door. And if somebody came in, I would bing them. I wouldn't think a thing about it. If they were coming in to harm me, I would rather blind them than kill them. So, just my thought.
How many people here have been the victim of a crime?
What?
Have been the victim of a crime?
Big or little.
Verbal,
Like where you're
threatened.
right, where your life has been in danger.
No, my life wasn't in danger.
Yeah. And of us, how many of us carry guns? I carry a gun too. Well, I have one, but
I worked in downtown Memphis. And
yeah, I would probably drive a tank actually, but
yeah.
but it's fear.
Yeah.
What drives those men in the Waffle House? Maybe there's another thing I want to talk about there, but it's fear that you have been told to be afraid. Like if you ask my father, he is convinced that any second someone is going to break into our house and kill us all. When statistically it is very clear that we are at the lowest bracket to be the victim of a crime. It's very clear. You know who the people who are most likely to be the victim of a crime are? The poor people.
What?
Poor people. The very people who are the most oppressed are the most likely to be the victim of a crime. So how did this get in our head? How did this become part of our identity? Why did we latch on to that?
It's
In
the
song,
TV.
well, in the song from The Sound of Music, but it says you've got to be carefully taught. And we have been taught to be afraid by family, by politicians, by TV, by movies. I mean,
The media.
The media, we are bombarded. Now, I'm not I like my news programs and I like to be informed and all of that. And, and when you are so ingrained with that, I can see how those two men felt like they needed those guns for whatever reason they thought they needed them.
A lot of times when you see the Waffle House gun carriers, that is a display of their privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Just because I can.
Just because,
Privilege, yes. But at the Waffle House, it is a privilege expressed by people who feel that their privilege, if they are, either they don't have privilege or it is deeply threatened.
Or threatened, exactly.
And it also, and I can say this as a male, it also is an expression of what they believe a male is.
Cowboy culture.
Yes.
But what about the women who carry a pistol in their pocketbook that you don't see? I mean, you don't really know.
I mean, if you look at the data, I can't believe every woman on this planet doesn't carry a gun. But that's just me.
Well, it's at the University of South Carolina. It's in downtown Columbia, and there's, you know, it's got a certain level of crime, not only from the people in the people who live in Columbia, but in the university setting. And there was a man who was an ex-policeman who started teaching a PE class on how to defend yourself. He couldn't teach enough classes. He taught mostly young women, but not all. And that to me was just a vital thing that he did, because he wasn't teaching them to carry a gun. He was teaching them to defend themselves in much more effective manner.
Right.
Because you've been, you know, many of us have been told, if you carry a gun and you're confronted by someone stronger than you, it very often can be taken away from you and used on you instead of on them.
Well, I mean, what I can tell you is my brother was in law enforcement, and he said, you know, the person to be most afraid of, or it's the person who has one gun. They know how to use it. They know how to use it in a high stress situation. They're familiar with it. They can take it apart. They can put it together. And most of the time that doesn't describe us at all. But there are other ways to protect yourself. And can you talk yourself out of fear?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to admit you're wrong. I think that's the starting point, admitting, well, maybe it really isn't like this.
Right. I mean, looking at the surface, this is a rational fear. I mean, I've been a victim of crime. It is a rational fear. These things can happen. So can we talk ourselves out of it and move more into a fuller, where our identity isn't so much defined by fear, where life isn't such a threat?
Is it talking us out, or is it adopting and experiencing another reality?
A new way of being.
That I was reading, I don't love this magazine, but I read it every time it comes, Time magazine this week. They were talking about friendship, whole page on 5 steps to deep friendship. But the biggest thing was talking about the youth pandemic of depression, and a third of female young people have a suicide plan.
Good grief.
But then they go on to say their parents are just as depressed. And the depressions feed each other. And they talk about the absence of what we have right here, that most kids, most parents do not feel. They feel isolated. They feel that there are no people to depend on if they are in trouble. There are no people they can be vulnerable with, and so forth. And then they go on to talk about some elements of fixing the problem, which isn't very deep. But the thing that was really struck me was not that kids are depressed and even suicidal. that parents are just, I mean, statistically, just as depressed and suicidal as the kids.
Well, I have a whole soapbox about it. Because I come from a multi-generational family of depression and anxiety. They don't just run in my family, it gallops. And you can tell that because of the amount of addiction that's in my family. I'm the first person in my family to go to therapy. And my family thinks I'm weird. They don't get why I sit down and talk to a stranger for an hour. And I have really great health insurance, so it's not expensive. But I shell out money to talk to a perfectly good stranger when all my family sits on the same road. And I'm like, I have to go somewhere to talk about you because you are the reason I am depressed.
Why do you think there is such a problem with depression?
Well, first of all, I think she has to have her sisters. Yeah, I have a galloping
Yeah.
mental illness running through. But go ahead. And I'm the first person to go to therapy.
So what is depression? You know, you hear talk about it, but why are people depressed?
Lack of hope.
Yeah, lack of hope.
Not being able to get a job.
Yeah.
These young people,
Feeds into lack of hope.
I have 2 grandchildren who are struggling. And they've gotten their degrees. One of them has a master's degree.
They've done everything right.
They've done everything right, and all of a sudden,
They're swimming in student debt, making mediocre jobs.
and can't make enough without parent support to support themselves. And yet, I'm told, it's not your problem, Mom. And you just pray about it, but it's not your problem. And yet I see the depression in my child over his children.
You know,
and that hurts. That hurts so much.
You know, families, and I'm just going to throw this out here. Families used to be geographically together for generations. My great-great-grandparents lived here. Their children lived over here. Their children lived over here. Their children lived over here. And, you know, crazy or not, they're still your family. You do have some kind of support there. But now we have been flung all over, and I'm online a lot, and I tell myself, well, this is fine, this counts, but I don't think it does. I think, yeah.
One of the words I've heard lately, which really strikes me, is the atomization of society. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Another, though, in the Time magazine was feeling no real feeling of purpose and meaning.
Ooh, I know.
That life is meaningless for me as a teenage person. And the effort to improve my life, to feel better, to do all these things just isn't worth the trouble because there's no purpose. And that dates back a long time, but it's more. But you know, my mother and dad were early samples of this atomization thing. Their families are from, or at least my dad, their families are from Alabama, and they settled in South Carolina, which was a night's drive from any member of the family. Dad first settled in South Carolina because his father told him, John, get out of Montgomery. There are too many Coopers here.
Where does faith enter into our field?
We're getting there.
Okay,
I want to hear what everybody has to say, then we'll get there.
I'll say that.
Just a two-pronged sort of thing. I'm sure you guys know this. Maybe it's because I'm younger and I have to learn it through history than experience. But what actually caused the flinging of families was the World War II GI Bill and like the housing settlement stipends that people got. That's when suburbs sprung up. And because suburbs sprung up, everybody didn't have to stay on the same tract of land. And they wanted to be able to have this new experience for their family. And so that's kind of this, the fleeing of people is because of the GI stipends. I have weird little history and things like that. And then the second thing is I very much understand and get the hopelessness because it feels like we're in a stage of regression right now. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, my mom said she never thought she would see in her lifetime her own rights being taken away. And with Roe v. Wade overturned, that can also, the precedents for interracial marriage, for LGBTQ marriage, and it can just domino. And with what seems to be like conservatives are becoming more conservative, and then liberals are creating an even wider net trying to help protect the people that are being harmed by conservatism. It's like there's no common middle ground, and it feels this hopelessness because it seems like nothing's getting resolved and we're just a bunch of bulls butting our heads together.
Well, everything is so polarized.
Yeah.
That it used to be we had this side and this side, but this side would listen to this side would listen to this side. Nobody wants to listen anymore. It's I'm right and this is the only way. I'm right and this is the only way. And we've gotten ourselves in this country in a situation where maybe the best candidates can't run because they can't afford to run.
But
and the ones that can afford, heaven help us. So it's a
yeah.
It's a catch-22. Do y'all feel that too? I mean, but I'm not going to throw up my hands. I'm going to do my civic responsibility, but I get real upset, and I'm like Ann. I am not going to listen to the media anymore. That I want to stay tuned in, but I'm not going to listen to it. All that rhetoric every day, 24/7 news. I'm not doing it because
Well, you have to pick your media.
I can do. That's right.
Unfortunately.
But I'm going to do better things with my time, and so I'm kind of pouring myself into my art. And when I'm at home and I sit down to watch TV, I'm a lot of times watching art tutorials rather than that.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. I can't.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube too. I just
One of my former ministers told me, I told him that, at the time that I said, this is really, politics has really gotten depressing, and this has been some time ago. And he said, don't listen to news when you're in the radio, when you're in your car driving around. Don't listen to news on your radio. Put pretty music on, or put something relaxing. But I think, too, at the same time, you're putting up blinders.
well, that's right.
And you need to be aware of what's going on, but not to the point that it pulls you down and you're inactive. And I see that to be a major problem, is people are becoming inactive. They're saying, whatever, you know. I just
I
give
can't
up.
make a difference. What is
Right.
my little opinion? Yeah, and that causes depression.
Yeah.
I see and I empathize with the not over saturating ourselves with the hype. But how does that affect our vocation as lifetime students. You are not overeducated, you're a lifetime student. I am a lifetime student. I don't have as many degrees as you do, but I mean, I've been 20 years taking courses every year and so forth. Actually 50. If we drive in the car and deliberately don't watch or don't hear NPR, we're missing a lot of non-hype opportunities.
That's a good station. I listened to that one.
Yeah, now, but at the same time, I have a friend in Brownsville, Texas, right down on the Mexican border. And y'all will recall that 3-4 days ago, there was that whole area, according to the national news, was supposed to be inundated with floods. I called my friend. He said, well, the local news says something entirely different. I don't get my weather from the national news because it is global. I get my weather from somebody who knows us and knows the specific situation. Brownsville is going to have some rain. That's it. No problem.
Right. And I also think it's really important, or at least this is how I survive Fox News constantly in the background of my house. Recognize it for what it is. They have an agenda that they are promoting there. And they've found an audience that is very receptive to that agenda. And for whatever reason, and because they're feeling threatened or they're mounting a backlash against what they perceive as a loss of their own rights because they see it as a zero-sum game. But what it is an agenda. And just because someone else's identity is tied up in that agenda doesn't mean that ours has to be sucked away because of it. Or you could just put a parental lock on Fox News and leave it off because you know they're never going to figure out how to fix it.
I don't even think they're a legitimate source of news anymore.
Clearly they have been sued
10 years ago,
lying.
that was on practically 24/7 in my house. And when my husband died, that was a promise I made to myself that I was not going to watch Fox News anymore. I didn't like what I was hearing, and it was bringing this country into, if people listened to it, and a lot of people did, bringing this country into this frantic state and this, oh my goodness, oh my,
Right.
And I understand they're still doing that, even though a lot has been curtailed, but I just don't agree with their.
And he was an educated man.
Yeah.
That's what scares me,
Yeah.
because I keep saying, well, education is the key.
But to put our heads in the sand and ignore what other news outlets are presenting as truth doesn't make it go away.
Well, that's true.
It just makes us unaware. And I think we have an obligation to at least try to understand what is the reason for their angst.
Yeah.
What is threatening them? And they'll tell you, if you listen close, they will tell you exactly what they're afraid of.
But if just because I don't like that
Right.
doesn't make it safe for me not to know that.
Well, I don't want to bury my head in the sand, but I just am not going to let it affect my life to the point that I just feel awful all the time. I can't save the world, you know, and that's, it's a catch-22, you know. You want to be informed, and you want to do what you can in your corner of the world, but I feel like my efforts can be more positive by not spending time, you know, at least a lot of time, listening to all of these different, so I let them think what they think.
Gotta pick our sources.
Yeah.
You know, spend an equal amount of time in prayer.
Yes.
Because
Or doing something
we
nice
can
for
do all
somebody.
things through Christ.
Being kind.
So for every 30 minutes with Fox in the background, spend 30 minutes in the Bible. And this will bring you to your center and comfort you and allow you to move out into the world and do what we need to do.
But some people read the Bible differently than what I do.
You just pick the part you like, it's fine.
Seems to be the
Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back and kind of wrap up the point I was making earlier about like, because I guess by technicality, historians have not quite figured it out. I don't know if I'm a baby millennial or like an elder Gen Z. They can't decide from that 5-year pitch because I didn't grow up with a cell phone, but I got one at a very young age, and that seems to be the deciding factor. My generation, I think there's a lot of depression and hopelessness because it feels like a lot of problems have just been handed off to us. Like, I remember being in kindergarten, being told by my music teacher that the sky is going to have rain, acid rain, and everything's going to burn up, and it's because we didn't recycle. I was 5. And my generation is supposed to be the generation that fixes recycling, and my generation is the first generation to use all-inclusive language and have all-inclusive access for people. And my generation is supposed to be the generation that creates all this legislation to protect people. And my generation is supposed to be a generation that starts having actual mutual healthy marriages instead of this cycle of divorce that our parents and grandparents put before us. And my generation is supposed to be this generation that's overeducated but somehow not in crushing debt. And we're supposed to do all these things to fix everything. And so we're truly pioneering these paths, and then all these generations before us are scolding us because we're doing it wrong.
Well, I don't know who's scolding you. I do know you got support. You got a lot of support. I know in Gen X, we're right there.
I think baby boomers are too.
Sorry.
A few of us old timers.
Yeah.
Every now and then, okay, boomer. Every now and then, but you guys are you've got the guts. I mean, you guys are awesome, and we're right there with you.
There's a comedian, and it's talking about the difference between millennials and Gen Zers, and we've had to battle out gay marriage in the Supreme Courts. And that's millennials, and then Gen Zers come along and are like, what is even gender? Why can't we have 7 people in a relationship? Why do we have to go through this? And they're like, okay, we will give you gay marriage. Please just leave the rest alone.
Yeah, I know. And we'll get there.
Yeah.
The arc of justice is long, but it bends the right way, and not alone.
Right, that's another identity.
Right.
Generation.
Generation.
Generational identity. is a little bit of a chimera, because I was just talking to 3 45-year-olds in the last week, all theoretically of one generation. Well, one's 46. All of them saw themselves and their identity as different from the stereotype of their generation.
I feel that.
All of Jonathan.
Well, who creates this stereotype?
In different ways. You know, one woman is, you know, it's totally different in her understanding of herself than my nephew. And neither are part of the stereotypical understanding of a 45-year-old. I'm certainly don't see myself as a stereotypical 80-year-old white male.
Definitely not. Can we
And
clone you?
like Southern people at that.
No, I want him all by
No, we
myself.
need more.
More of a school of thought vibe.
I know.
So that all of these self-identifications can be, not always, they can be helpful, but they can also be prisons.
And a lot of our identifiers are based on things we can't change, which I find almost unhelpful. Like, based on your sexuality, or your race, or where you come from. Like, my boyfriend is from New York. Most of my friends are from New York and up north. And we joke and poke at each other, but I do feel a little discredited at times because I'm A, younger than them, and B, Southern, even though I am more educated than them.
I would have given anything to been born a man.
Oh my gosh, Taylor Swift knows. She says if I were the man, I'd be the man.
I know. I imagine this brain in a man's body.
Oh my gosh. If we had the
Oh, well.
confidence and ability of a mediocre white man, we could run the world.
Seriously.
Not even excellent, just mediocre.
Sorry, guys.
Well, these men aren't mediocre white
No,
men.
I mean, you don't count. It's totally different. You're total allies.
You
but-
should never,
but
ever,
absolutely.
ever accept that.
Mhm.
You should never accept it. Just because you're a female, just because you're a certain age, you should never let that deter you from doing what you know is right. I had a boss who was from Long Island, New York, and he told me, number one, that Southerners were stupid. Number two, women were inferior. And number three, my education was worthless because it was not from a high-end college.
Did you have the
You
boss
bring
from
that
9 to
respect.
5 or
And
something?
I said, and I told him, and I said, and you have never had a technician as productive as I am. So I think you need to rethink your thinking. You should never let that limit you. And, you know, you need to just speak up regardless of the consequences. He could have fired me, but he would have
We're
been
Southern.
cutting
We
off
don't
his
speak
nose
up.
to spite his face, you know.
Oh, if I say something really intelligent, I try to do it in a thicker accent. Just for that.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I had the same thing. Women went to United Way of America national office, run by a bunch of Bostonians, and they were absolutely sure that I was stupid, that I was racist,
Yeah.
and that I could not run a major thing. It took about 6 months, and they began to understand maybe I was an exception, maybe their opinions was
The one exception.
right.
The one exception.
But yeah, I think I hear you women, and I agree with you that the discrimination and the disparagement of women is another characteristic of our society, just like racism. But you're not the only ones.
Right. I mean, we can't compare oppression. We're not in an oppression war here.
No,
Everybody has their own.
it's apples and oranges. It's fruit, but it's so
And
vastly different.
There is an intersection, absolutely. But you know, like I said, this is not a competition. But what I do want to, as we conclude for today, is it's 11 o'clock, and how can we love ourselves like the way God wants us to love us, and value your identity in Christ. Christ loves you. There's so much value, and honor that. I mean, it will center you. It will give your life so much more meaning. And don't diminish what Christ holds in esteem. He loves you. Don't diminish that. And this is the really bad, but try to stop comparing yourselves with other people. That never works. Walk your own path, do your own thing, and nurture that relationship with God every single day. Go back to that font of love. Go back to that source of who you really are and who loves you and knows you the most. Your family may be spread all over. They may, really need some psychiatric help, but there's one entity that loves and knows you more than anything. And take care of your body. It's a meat sack for your soul, but you still want your soul to be happy in its meat sack.
It's your meat sack. So
Right. Love your body. It moves you. It gets you where you need to be. And be gracious with yourself when things don't go well. But resolve to do better when they can. Nobody's perfect. And God doesn't expect that. He knows us. Loves us anyway. And just love yourself the way God loves you. And we'll be all right. And this will be a great place we'll get more people in here once we spread that you are loved. You walk in this church, you're loved.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Which this church is the exception to the stereotype. A lot of people, I tell them I'm a minister, they hold their breath until I'm like, we go to a church that's LGBTQIA friendly and with race reconciliation. They're like, oh, it's like the room just got a little more comfortable again.
Right. And any questions? I love you guys.
You've given us good thoughts for the week.
I'm still looking at myself in the mirror.